Now there is a time for complicated and sweaty DPS rotations, and then there is a time for sitting back and pressing 3. So let's dive in with one of the most relaxing DPS builds in Guild Wars 2, Pistol Thief. Welcome back everyone. Pistol Thief is one of the easiest to play DPS builds in all of Guild Wars 2, and despite the need to press hardly any buttons, it actually does a surprising amount of DPS. Now most full DPS builds in Guild Wars 2 will do somewhere over 40k at their absolute maximum. We're not going to be reaching that, but getting above 30k is easily achievable, and that is enough for you to clear almost all areas of Guild Wars 2 endgame. And another unexpected benefit, the fact that this build is so easy to play means that it's very hard to mess up. There have even been times where I've found myself at the very top of the DPS charts, all while playing a build where I can literally spin around on my chair while I play. But there is more that you can do with this build, so I'm going to be covering all the different versions of this build, one where you can press literally 0 buttons, one where you can support your team with boons, and another where you can get surprisingly competitive DPS, all while spamming one skill. So let's dive in. Now for Pistol Thief, we must first equip 2 pistols. Now the entire build functions while spamming one skill. That is Pistol 3 Unload. Now the way Thief weapon skills work is that instead of having skill cooldowns like you would on other classes, you instead have initiative, these little diamonds above your skill bar. Now each skill will cost a set amount of initiative, so a lot of different Thief builds actually boil down to just spamming the highest damaging skill per initiative as much as possible, filling time and then spamming again. We're going to be taking that to the extreme here with Unload, which is going to cost us 3 initiative, and if all of your attacks hit, you are going to regain another 2 initiative. Now this combined with your inherent initiative regeneration rate means that you can spam Unload indefinitely, provided that all of your attacks hit. Now one of the first things you're going to want to do is change your auto attack from Vital Shot to Unload. To do that, you can simply hold Control and right click on Unload. And with that, your auto attack icon is now changed, and that is honestly the main skill you need to know about on Pistol. It completely replaces your auto attack, so there's no need to worry about Vital Shot. Bowler Shot is good for a little bit of immobilize, but because we don't have any condition duration baked into this build, the immobilized duration is not particularly long. Headshot is an incredibly useful CC skill, so make sure you at least are aware of what it does. That 2-second daze is quite handy, even if it does cost 4 initiative. And Black Powder is going to create a smoke field which can blind nearby mobs, but because we are a fully ranged build and this is quite expensive in terms of initiative, you'll find yourself very rarely making use of this. Now when it comes to the builds and the different options we have available, I'm going to start with the traits that are consistent across each of the different builds, and then we're going to go into some of the specifics. First up, with Deadly Arts, we're going to take Dagger Training because even though we're not wielding daggers, we're going to get extra power for free. Reveal Training is once again going to give us extra power. The main reason this is here though is that extra 80 power. Expose Weakness will cause you to deal 2% increased damage per unique condition on your target. So while it won't be hugely relevant for you when you're by yourself, when you're with a group of people and the boss has all conditions on it, that's going to be a significant damage increase. Executioner is one of your big damage modifiers, and it's going to cause you to deal 20% extra damage to any target below 50% health. That's a big old modifier. And in Critical Strikes, Keen Observer is going to give you 10% extra critical chance, as well as an extra 5% critical chance when our health is above 50%. So a potential 15% extra crit chance, very handy for reaching crit cap. Twin Fangs is going to cause us to deal 5% increased critical damage, and if we're above 50% health, we're going to deal an extra 2% critical damage, so 7% total. And we're also going to get increased critical hit chance when we are hitting a foe from behind or the sides, if we're flanking them, or if they are defiant. So we're talking any boss above a champion. This is a 7% critical strike increase, and it's very important for us to reach 100% crit chance as a power build. An important deviation from the regular power thief builds is taking the Deadly Aim trait, which is going to cause our pistol attacks to pierce enemies and deal 10% extra damage. So this you can actually cheese by targeting an enemy that is towards the back of a group, attack them, and then hit everything between you and them for a whole bunch of extra cleave damage. So keep that in mind. Ferocious Strikes is some extra critical damage when targets are above 50% health. So power build damage modifiers are always a good thing. No Quarter is going to make it so that when you land a critical hit when you have Fury, it's going to extend the duration of your Fury. So upkeeping 100% Fury on yourself is very, very easy. On top top of that, we're also getting 250 ferocity, which is a significant damage increase. Now, Deadeye is the elite specialization that you typically would associate with Pistol Thief, so we'll cover this one first. For the purposes of this build, the main thing you need to know about Deadeye is that your steel is replaced by Deadeye's mark, which, thanks to the trait Iron Sight, will make you deal 10% extra damage to your mark target and take 15% less damage from that target. So it helps with your damage and your survivability. The trait One in the Chamber is going to make it so that whenever you cast a cantrip, which is one of your Deadeye specific skills, you're going to get a new stolen skill, and these stolen skills deal 25% more damage. Now, your stolen skills in Deadeye will typically provide boons and deal some damage, so they're nice things to slot in, and this is a nice little free bit of extra damage. Renew Engage is an important trait to be aware of, or at least just know how it interacts with your build. So Deadeye's mark will recharge whenever your marked target is defeated. So you'll mark a target, defeat it, then as soon as it's gone, you can mark a new target. Make sure you're always marking a target. It gives you a whole bunch of benefits. Premeditation will cause you to deal increased strike damage from each boon that you have. This is a little bit of extra damage when you are by yourself, and you get some extra concentration, so boon duration. This is a nice little bit of extra damage on yourself when you're solo, but when you're in a full group and you have all the boons on you, this can be a huge damage increase. Like we mentioned before, Iron Sight is going to make it so you deal 10% extra damage to your marked target, and you're going to take 15% reduced damage from them. Be Quick or Be Killed will grant you a few seconds of quickness whenever you mark a foe, and you get an extra 200 power and 200 precision whenever you have a target marked. So once again, we're always going to want to be marking a target. Now, a very handy variant of this build that you can run to actually help your team out with providing boons, and it's also quite good for running open world, because running around in open world with quickness is amazing, is swapping out the trait Be Quick or Be Killed for Fire for effect. So this is going to make it whenever you mark a target, instead of getting a random stolen skill, you will always get the stolen skill Steal Time, which will grant you a few seconds of quickness, and Fire of Effect will also make it so Steal Time will give you 8 stacks of Might and Fury as well. Now, if you want a version of this build that doesn't use an elite specialization because either you don't have an elite specialization unlocked, or if you want to shock your team and bring in a core build that actually does quite decent damage, you can run Trickery instead of Deadeye. Now, the main reason for taking Trickery is the trait Lead Attacks, which whenever you use a skill that costs initiative, you're going to rack up more and more stacks of lead attacks, which causes you to deal more damage up to a maximum of 15%. Because you're constantly going to be spamming unload, this is going to be capped out at all times, so it's a free damage increase more or less. Now, traits we take are going to be all about buffing up our steel, so we can make that as useful as possible. Throw the Crime is going to grant you and your allies some might, fury, and swiftness, which, hey, being able to provide some extra boons for your team for free is just nice. Bountiful Theft will cause your steel to grant you and all nearby allies vigor, and it's also going to rip boons from your target as well. So if there's a boss where you do need some boon rip, this is actually quite a useful skill to have, and if your target doesn't have boons, you're going to get some might as well. There's not many useful traits to take in the Grandmaster slot of Trickery, so we're going to take Sleight of Hand, which will make our steel deal a slight daze to the target, and it's also going to reduce the recharge of steel, so we can use it more often, grant more boons, get more cool effects. It's all good stuff. The fun fact about this build is that you don't really have to press any buttons at all. You can simply set your Pistol 3 to auto cast and you're off to the races. It's nice to press steel occasionally to grant boons, but there's no Deadeye's mark to worry about. This is as simple as it can get. Now we come to the Daredevil version of this build. Now this build actually does deal quite decent damage, much more than the Deadeye and Core Thief version of this build, and that's entirely down to the sheer number of damage modifiers that the Daredevil trait line actually gives us. Now Marauder's Resilience will give you some extra health based on your power, and you're going to take reduced damage from enemies in melee range. Just a nice little quality of life trait. Weakening Strikes will make it so that after you dodge, you're going to inflict weakness on targets. Weakened targets will deal reduced damage to you, so it's good for survivability, and you'll deal more damage to them. Important thing about Daredevil is that dodging is part of your DPS rotation, so that's actually where the little bit of a step up in difficulty comes, but it's worth it. Havoc Specialist, you're going to deal more damage when your endurance is not full, so important, make sure your endurance isn't full for 15% extra damage. Endurance Thief will grant you 50 endurance whenever you steal a target, so it will fill one of your 3 endurance bars that you can see above your health bar. Super useful when attacks coming in and you need some clutch endurance because you burn all your dodges as part of your DPS rotation. Now the way Daredevil works is that as soon as you take a Grandmaster trait, your dodge is going to be replaced by one of 3 different types of dodges. For this, we're going to be taking the power damage version, Bounding Dodger. So your dodge is replaced by Bound. It's going to deal damage whenever you land your dodge, and for 6 seconds after, you're going to deal 15% extra damage. So one, we're going to want to try and land our dodge on our target to deal a good burst of damage to them, and we're going to want to dodge often enough so we can keep up this Bounding Dodger buff as much as possible. This is where all the difficulty comes in with this build, and I'm using the term difficulty very, very loosely. Part you have to be aware of is just moving around your target and just gauging where to land your dodge so you can maximize your damage. To compensate for this, you can actually deal really competitive damage, and once you're comfortable with this, you can compete really, really well with other DPS builds while still being very simple to play compared to basically any other build out there in Guild Wars 2. So this is the version of the build that I'll run if, one, I wanted to try and sweat a bit in terms of DPS, and also if I need something that's a bit more mentally stimulating than the Core Thief or the Deadeye versions. Now, for some changes you can make to the build for open world. There's quite a few different options here, but here's my personal preference. Now, I like running the quickness Deadeye version of the build, so we're going to swap out Be Quick or Be Killed for 5 for effect, so we can grant ourselves and allies quickness, because running around in open world with quickness is great. This is going to be a more reliable source of quickness, particularly when we're dealing with more durable enemies, anything beyond just a standard mob, because Be Quick or Be Killed will grant you quickness whenever you mark your target, but it's not a particularly long duration. 5 for effect will give you much more quickness. If you want a really cushy time surviving, you can take Invigorating Precision instead of No Quarter. You're going to trade some damage, but you're going to heal for a percentage of your outgoing critical hit damage, which when you combine this with the skill Signet of Malice, you actually do get quite a lot of survivability baked in. Another somewhat forgotten trait to sub out whenever you're in open world by yourself is swapping out Reveal Training for Even the Odds. This is going to make it so you provide 10 stacks of vulnerability whenever you steal, which when you're by yourself, 10 stacks of vulnerability is 10% extra damage. So this can be quite worth it in open world when targets won't necessarily be capped out on vulnerability. Now when it comes to our gear, there's a few different versions of this gear that you can run. It's important to remember that because you get extra precision when you take the main Deadeye DPS build, you actually need a bit less crit chance with that. But because I like just running one set of gear and swapping these builds around depending on my mood, I'll show you the gear setup that will allow you to reach 100% crit chance with every version of this build, and in the description below I'm going to include versions specific for each if you want to min-max it. But this is what I run day to day, and honestly if we're not going to be competing with 45k DPS builds, there's not too much point min-maxing a percentage or two here or there, so don't worry about it. So for our gear, we're going to run a mix of Berserkers and Assassin's gear, so it's going to be all Berserkers except for the shoulders and one accessory. This will let you reach 100% crit chance with all versions of this build, and we don't even need to rely on the precision from Signet Fragility, which frees up another utility slot for you. For our runes, we're going to be running Rune of the Dragon Hunter, which is quite typical for a DPS build. For our weapons, we're obviously going to be taking Pistol with a Sigil of Force and a Sigil of Impact. These are our go-to DPS sigils, so it's pretty straightforward. And for our relic, we're going to be taking Relic of the Thief, which will basically give us 5% extra damage as we spam our unload. Another change for open world you can make is swapping out Relic of the Thief for Relic of Zakharos as well. This will make you heal based on proportion of your critical strike damage, so it's working in the same way as Invigorating Precision. Again, you will be trading damage, but the survivability you get from this is insane. Now in Pistol Thief, you strictly don't need a weapon swap. However, a personal favorite of mine is to run Spear on weapon swap. But the main reason I like to bring this is for the number 4 skill Distracting Throw, which costs a measly 2 initiative and is a 1.5 second daze. So if a break bar pops up, you can simply swap to Spear, spam this as much as you can, and you'll see break bars get absolutely deleted. With this skill alone, you can deal more break bar damage than most of the rest of your team combined. So having Spear on swap can take you from simply spamming one skill for damage to actually really helping out your team. For our food and utility, we're going to be taking the standard power DPS food, which is going to be sweet and spicy butternut squash or whatever variant of sous vide steaks you like. For our utility, we'll take potent superior sharpening stones. Now when it comes to our skills, we actually have a huge amount of variety. The only skill that is kind of locked is Assassin's Signet, which we're mostly going to be taking for the passive, which will grant you extra power. You can basically just leave this on red and only really press it if you're close to the end of a boss phase and you want to get an extra burst of damage in for the last few seconds of the fight. But generally, you can just leave this alone. It's here for the passive. For our elite skill, you can either take Thieves Guild for more damage, or if you want to help carry break bars even further with your amazing Spear 4 prowess, you can take Basilisk Venom, which is one of the best CC skills in the game. You combine a Basilisk Venom with you spamming Spear 4, you can watch break bars just absolutely vanish. For our heal skill, I'll typically take Signet of Malice because it's going to heal you when you attack. You're going to be constantly attacking with unload. This is more passive healing. This build's all about being passive, so this is very on brand. But feel free to sub this out, particularly if you're on the quickness Deadeye version of this build. Running Malicious Restoration as a cantrip will grant you extra stolen skills, which you can use for more quickness. That's a nice little sub you can do. An important skill to take, particularly if you're on the Deadeye version of the build, is going to be Mercy, which is going to refresh your Deadeye's mark, grant you extra initiative depending on how many malice stacks you have, and it's also a stun break. So one issue you can run into on this build is that even though you do have functionally infinite initiative as long as you land all your unload hits, if you start missing a few unload hits here or there, if you have to dodge or the boss moves or you have to deal with the mechanic, you may actually find you start running out of initiative gradually over the course of a fight, which is not what we want. Mercy helps rectify this. This also gives you the option of spamming your pistol 4 for CC and then instantly refreshing your initiative so you can start blasting unload again uninterrupted. Not strictly required, but if you are running a Deadeye version of this build, I highly recommend Mercy. The other slot is basically free. I quite like running Shadow Flare. It's a good amount of AoE damage and just extra damage is a nice thing. And if you're running the quickness version of this build, it's another cantrip, so more steal time casts. Shadow Step is an amazing skill. It's a stun break. It's a relatively low cooldown port where you can port somewhere and then teleport back. And if I'm using this build to kite on any of the versions of Kadim, I'll take this skill. It's super handy. Haste is a good skill to bring in open world. It's going to grant you some quickness, extra boons, and there's also a stun break on quite a short cooldown, which is very nice. The passive of Signal Agility will grant you some extra precision, which is useful for reaching crit cap. Not required for us, we've structured our gear around it, but if you activate it, it's going to remove conditions and grant endurance to allies, which if you're in a condition heavy encounter, super handy. Pitfall is great for some extra CC. Shadow Portal is great if you need to portal your team around on different encounters. Just another way you can really level up your pistol thief skills and start helping your team out even more. Shadow Refuge is good for stealth if you need it, and Smoke Screen is very useful for blinding trash mobs and also blocking projectiles. So if you're on a projectile heavy encounter and you need some projectile defense, super useful to bring, helps your team out a ton. Now for the damage rotation section of this guide, we're going to start from the easiest and work our way up. The Core Thief version, just use Pistol 3. Yeah, that's kind of it. For the Deadeye version of this build, first we're going to mark our target and then we're just going to use Pistol 3. And every 20 seconds we're going to mark our target again. That's basically it. If you need to mark a new target or something, or if you've missed your Deadeye's mark, just use Mercy to refresh it. That's basically the build. Now for the Quickness Deadeye version, we have a few more steps. First going to mark our target, use our stolen skill to provide quickness, use unload for a bit, then start using our other cantrips such as Mercy, Shadow Flare, and Malicious Restoration to grant us more casts of steal time. Use them whenever we can, and this will be quite easy to upkeep 100% quickness on. So really just cast unload like you always do, and use your cantrips to get steal time casts and use them whenever they're available, and it should all work out. Now for the Daredevil version of the build. We have to balance using our unload for damage as well as using our dodges often enough to not fill up on endurance and keep up the bounding dodger buff, and always try and land your dodge on the target. So to start off, we're going to dodge, use Fist Flurry if you're running it, and after this just use it off cooldown. I like to use it after a dodge, it makes sense. We're going to cast unload anywhere from 2 to 3 times, usually 2 if it's following a Fist Flurry, 3 if we're not doing anything else, dodge again, and repeat. And that's really it. You have a bit of force movement to deal with on this build, but because of all the damage modifiers that you have, you actually can pump quite significant damage on this build. So use this if you're wanting a bit more challenge, or if you're wanting to make other DPS players sweat that they're losing to a pistol thief. Now Spear is a bit of a funny weapon in how it works, where you're effectively going to be stringing together chains of your 2, 3, and 4 skills. Your skills 2 and 3 are going to flip over as you use them, so depending on what you need, you can achieve different effects by using these skills in different orders. However, we're in the realm of a low intensity accessible build today, so I'll just give you the basics. But if you are in Spear for any reason and want to move from dealing break bar damage to actual damage, you're going to be doing the chain 2, 3, 2, then 4, 3, 3, which will grant you stealth, then use your stealth attack and repeat. Your stealth attack on Spear is actually going to regenerate initiative for you, so that's why we're trying to use the final skill in the 3 chain to enter stealth, and our skill Distracting Throw if we use it after a finished skill, which in this case is going to be our final 2 skill, Falling Spider. It's going to grant us 10% extra damage for 10 seconds, so more damage is a good thing. That's why we're doing things in the order that they are. We're doing 2, 3, 2 for damage, then we're using 4 to get the damage modifier, we're using 3 for damage, then 3 again to enter stealth, use our stealth attack, regenerate initiative. And there we go, that is everything you need to know about every version of Pistol Thief. This is a great build to play if you're in need of an accessible, low intensity build, or something that just gives you the option to sit back and relax in various forms of endgame content. And if you want to play around with Spear, you've actually got an insane amount of break bar damage and utility, so there is actually a surprising amount you can do with this build. So if you are a pistol enjoyer and enjoy role playing as a gunslinger, this is the build for you. Let me know in the comments comments below, do you already run Pistol Thief? And if so, what is your favorite version of it? And with that, I'll catch you all next time. Cheers.